welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm your host, Richard Dugan, and I thank you so much for joining us on the radio broadcast at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. on a Sunday and Monday mornings at 1 a.m. The broadcast podcasts are available on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, as well as richarddugan.com, the homepage, as well as the radio shows page. And we encourage you, if you can, to support us financially to keep the programs moving forward and take care of all of the ancillary things through PayPal and Patreon accounts. They are for your security as well as ours. We hope that you will do your part and do what you can if you feel led to do so. We'll even take energetic support as well. And we also encourage you to go to our guest's website. We'll be giving you that during the interview so that you can continue your evolutionary process. We also encourage you to spend time in meditation, in prayer, in just quiet time during 2020, the year of perfect vision, and the 2020s, the decade of perfect vision. And we hope that you will do that. Listen to that still small voice, that divine self, your higher self, and follow the promptings. And find that still, small, quiet, peaceful place where you can just relax and get a hold of what's really important in your life. We encourage you to do that. And we also encourage you to stay tuned to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan. Stay tuned.
That's what life is all about. It's these wonderful experiences that we have that show us that we're taken care of. As long as we do our part to participate, listen to the still small voice, follow the promptings, and it's going to be good. I guarantee you it's going to be good. I can tell you from firsthand experience. Well, our guest is going to tell us it's going to be good as well. She's a beautiful lady who, on the inside as well as the out, who has written a wonderful, you could almost call it a memoir of sorts, called Soul Wounds and Sacred Revelations. It is a warrior daughter's awakening to pain and destiny. And we have the question to our listeners: is healing from childhood emotional pain or family karma even possible? Well, our guest, who is the author, Deneen Marlette Joyner, is our guest here on the program. Thank you so much for joining us, Deneen.
Hi, Richard. Thank you for having me.
I've been looking forward to this interview, especially because of your heritage, if you will.
Yes.
I have wanted to, and I'm not putting you up in this position as the authority here, but you obviously do have some information that we can learn from, not only as a Black woman, but also as an Indian.
Yes.
With long black flowing hair there, which is somewhat traditional, if you will. But that's your choice. I know there are people who have shorter hair,
Yes.
women as well as men.
Yes.
And I'm curious as to, first of all, your exposure to your Native American heritage. I would think that your Black heritage is probably more prominent because you look to me to be a Black. I would have never thought you had any Indian blood. You appear to me to be a Black woman. Tell me about the exposure you had to that heritage, which is part of what we're going to talk about today.
Yes. I would say that, I actually want to start with, I have a chapter in the book, Soul Wounds and Sacred Revelations, that actually speaks to your very question. And the title chapter is The Lesser of Two Evils, the Best of Both Worlds. So we're going to start there.
Okay.
The lesser of two evils for me growing up was identifying more with what you just mentioned, that I look like a Black woman. So to the public eye, as you just stated, when people see me, they automatically think, nothing about it. If there was a poll, you ask 10 people, they probably would say, she's a Black woman 10 times. Mm-hmm. Nobody would ever think that below the surface, as they say, don't judge a book by its cover. It's so true. I really identified with being more Native American than I did African American. And the reason why was because my mother, who was my primary caretaker, is Native American. So she is Native American. My father is West African Nigerian. And he comes from a land called Abaja in Africa. And we'll get to that in a minute. But my mother was, her family, our lineage actually is in Alabama and Georgia and upper state New York. So that's where the Native American people in my family, once they immigrated and they came here, that's where they primarily lived. Mm-hmm. And then we started to travel, to other areas. And my family ended up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We grew up as Native American people secretly. The secrecy was because we were mistreated as Native Americans. We have a history of being mistreated, misunderstood, being perceived as witches because we have spiritual gifts. So all of these things translated into my life as fear. Be afraid of who you are. Don't speak your truth. Don't tell people that you are Native American because you will be mistreated. This was real for me. My mother instilled that in me, that if you say, because that was her experience, if you say anything to that effect, if you say anything about being Native American, I can't guarantee what will happen to you. I remember distinctly being on college campus. It was probably the end of my freshman year when I got a phone call from my mother, frantic. I thought somebody had died. Really, what she was calling about was because she had gotten a phone call from the Admissions and Records Department, and they were being audited. And lo and behold, they pulled my file to prep before these people came. And when they looked at race, ethnicity, I had checked 2 boxes. I checked that of Native American, and I checked African American. You could only choose one, is what the lady told my mother. She cannot choose both boxes because back then you couldn't. So I was in the 80s at this time. We're in the 21st century. And can you believe that in the 80s, it hadn't evolved to being able to check as many boxes? Why not? Why can't you check more than one box? Mm-hmm. Because that's what it said. And so that was my reality then. So my mother, as I just told you, she had her own set of fears. And of course, being thousands of miles away from her, she wanted me to actually choose African American. She was very upset and disappointed that I would actually even allude that I was Native American, even though my mother is a very proud Native American woman. It was more fear-based. She was afraid of what would happen if there was any negative recourse behind me saying that I was Native American. So she told me to get over to the admissions office to fill out a different admissions paper and actually just choose African American. And so I have to tell you, Richard, that was a very, very dark day for me. I felt that I was betraying my Native American heritage and my blood. I thought that if I went against that, because my mother's wishes was for me to change it and basically just say that I was not Native American, that I was African American, and everybody was making light of it, including my mother, as far as, you know who you are. I'm not telling you not to say that you're, that's not your blood, but for records purposes, you cannot choose both. So you have to choose the one that really is more acceptable than the two, which is the lesser of two evils. The Native American was not acceptable, so therefore choose African American, okay? That's the lesser of two evils. And so I proceeded to go to the admissions office. The lady waited for me, who was very, flippant about, I don't know what the big deal is, that you can't just fill it out and pick one, So I did. I sat there for a minute. It was like I was taking a test of my life. That's how I felt. I felt like it was something I wasn't prepared to do, that I had to, really just choose. I had to choose something. And I felt in that moment, in choosing being African American and denying my Native American was just wrong, all the way wrong. So I sat there for.
Yeah, and you wanted to focus on both of them. You weren't looking to enhance either of them. You said, look, I am both of these. By the way, there is a differentiation that I know that I would venture a majority of whites are not clear on. Now, I have heard that it is better to refer to someone who you think is African American as black, because not all blacks are African American. you are, but there are blacks from Haiti,
Mm-hmm.
even maybe from Cuba,
Right.
people who have very dark skin who aren't
Yes.
necessarily quote unquote black, but
Mm-hmm.
you would perceive them as such from other parts of the world.
That's right.
And I remember in my early days of broadcasting, I was good friends with this one woman who was of uh, what I thought was Latina or
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Hispanic heritage.
Yes.
And we were chatting about another programmer who he brought his entourage into the station, and they were all from Mexico. So they were all Mexicans. I knew that. So I started asking her about her Mexican heritage. Oh, she got, and I'll say this, pissed off.
Mm.
She was mad. I am not Mexican or Hispanic. Now, it
Okay.
wasn't because she hated or had any problem with
Mm-hmm.
Hispanics, but
Right.
because she was, are you ready for this?
Uh-huh.
Spanish, which is
Okay.
not Mexican.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yes.
And it was
Mm-hmm.
then that I learned, okay, you first of all know your audience. And we were fine. It's just that she was just correcting me, and I appreciated
Sure.
that.
Sure.
But
Yes.
I heard on a podcast just recently where a gentleman, he's a black man who's doing these podcasts. And it's like, you might call it asking the hard questions.
Mm-hmm.
And he has all kinds of fairly well-to-do people, fairly well-known people, I should say. And one of the questions that came from his guest, because that's how it goes, what should I call you? Do I call
Mm-hmm.
you African American?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he made the distinction. Call me black,
Yes.
because not all blacks are African Americans.
That's right.
And one of the other aspects too is that you have Native Americans in this country in particular, but
Mm-hmm.
Native Americans span from Canada to the tip of South America,
That's right.
not just the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And I did, I don't know about you, I did my genealogy, my
Family
DNA.
tree.
I did a DNA
Mm-hmm.
test.
Yes.
And the
Right.
initial test came out that I have a fair percentage of Native American blood.
Yes. Yes. We all
North,
do. That's the funny
yeah.
part.
And also Italian, which I
Yes.
found out from a program that I could actually get my European citizenship because on my mother's side, my great grandfather was Italian
Mm-hmm.
and moved here and married his wife and so forth. So this whole issue of race and ethnicity, especially in this highly charged environment we live in today. And I like the fact that because it doesn't exactly have the same rhythm. African American lives matter doesn't flow. Black lives
Right.
matter, now that
Yeah.
flows.
Mm-hmm.
But the
Mm-hmm.
fact is that I would venture that many of the black individuals who have been harassed and who have lost their lives over the years,
Yes.
decades,
Mm-hmm.
were not all from their heritage didn't take them back to Africa.
Yes.
Now, there's another side of this that I'm going to dive into very quickly. We won't spend much more time on this because I do want to get into your story here about healing and all of this, especially childhood trauma. And that has to, but what I want to ask you about is this aspect, especially of the Native Americans. Now, I also found out, as I said, I found that out. And yet for the longest time, and I was born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona, which has reservations all over the place, all over
Right.
Arizona.
Yes.
And I never really wanted to dive into that culture because I actually felt at that time, this was before I knew, that I was like an interloper. I had no business going there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And yet I am very intrigued, and I've had the opportunity of interviewing a local Chumash Indian and talking about from the Chumash perspective, the medicine
Yes.
and those kinds of things. And then we even talked about how here we had a drought years ago before we ever moved here. And they actually did a rain dance and it brought rain. But he says there's
Oh,
always a
yeah.
price to pay, always
Yes.
a price to pay for
Yes.
altering or
That's right.
influencing.
That's right.
If you get rain, someone else isn't.
Right.
And so when we had our rains, we get them infrequently, but we've gotten some good rains and so on and so forth. We've had our droughts like other parts of the world, and I just basically say, hey, as far as rain's concerned, our turn is coming. This was during the drought. Our turn
Mm-hmm.
will come. We'll get our
Right.
rain,
Right.
and other places that are getting the rain, they won't. And that's
Mm-hmm.
just the cyclical process. But let me ask you about your Native American heritage, and what was it that drew you into, shall we say, the medicine of your, and is it Iroquois?
Yes, Iroquois. Mm-hmm.
I got it right.
Yes. You did. Yes. It's comprised of 6 different nations, and they basically just band together to become more powerful.
And see, that's the other aspect. There are so many different tribes.
There are.
Just as there are so many different tribes, if you will, of Africans,
Yes.
as there are of most of. I mean, I started thinking for some reason the thought of, I wonder. I know there's the German measles, and there's and I'm sure that, for example, influenza. I'm sure that just about every country has had an influenza named after their country. The German influenza and the Japanese,
Right. Right.
so on and so on and so on. So every country has contributed to
Yes.
some level of illness on the
For the
planet.
most part, huh?
Exactly. So it's like, doesn't do us much good, really, to blame one country or another,
Yes.
whether it was intentional, accidental. It
Right.
doesn't matter. Here we are.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Talk to me about the first or the early exposure, if you will. I mean, I know you've talked a little bit about this, to this Iroquois nation
Mm-hmm.
medicine and
Yeah.
history,
Yes.
culture, et cetera, et
Yes.
cetera.
So I was 5 years old when I started to connect to my gifts for the very first time. It started as an empath. I always tapped into people's emotions and their deep sadness, and it became mine. I would out of nowhere become very emotional, tearful, sensitive, worried. And my mother was concerned at first, and then she realized that it was the gifts that were coming on me. Now, I have to say that nobody really talked to me about that. So my mom knew, but she never sat me down and said, because of, you basically are connecting with God, you're going to be experiencing sensitive um, emotions. They're not yours, but it's just that's how God wires us, because that's how we're supposed to be with each other.
Mhm.
We're supposed to be sensitive to other people's needs and their concerns and their worries. And so I was 5. And so children are the closest thing to God. And so because I was 5, those were still a part of me and activated. And so I started to see these gifts in my life every day. And some of them were really, really fun. Like I used to connect with angels. I could see them. They would dance for me.
Oh,
They would talk to
wow.
me. And it was like really, and I laugh and I tell my friends, like, you played with Barbie, I played with angels. And, and it was just beautiful. And then on top of that, my mother, again, Native American, the heritage is the storytelling. And that means that my mother carries stories that weren't written in books, but were passed down from my ancestors. So from listening ear to mouth, this went on, it dates back over 500 years, these stories, and they've come forward. And so my mother is a storyteller in my family. She's 90 years old. She's a matriarch. And so generally that's usually who is the storyteller, is the oldest member in the family. However, I'm the storyteller in my family now, and I'm the youngest. So we have basically changed the entire trajectory of being a storyteller, being the matriarch. I'm actually the 7th daughter to my family. And the reason why it was passed on to me was because my great-great-grandmother, Lucinda, was a shaman, and she actually walked the earth 1872 to 1892. She died when she was 20 years old. She was a shaman. When she was born, she was prophetically born, and people knew she was coming, and her birth was revered. So when her mother gave birth to her, the whole community knew that this was a shaman in the making, and they treated her as such. So she was actually groomed from birth to be who she came here to be, and she fulfilled that. So she fulfilled it by the age of 20. Like, can you imagine coming here and, fulfilling what God put you here and you're done at 20? I mean, I was 47 when I started my journey.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was nowhere near where I was supposed to be.
Mm.
Can you
Well, I
imagine
know
that?
that. Oh, and I know that. So, I mean, you hear all these stories of these different people who, at the age of 70 or 80, what was it? Grandma Moses didn't paint her first painting or get notoriety until she was 80 or something like that. I mean,
Mhm.
but at the same time, did you also not feel that even though it was at the age of 47, that it was the right time?
Oh, for sure.
That
For sure.
maybe you weren't quite ready until that moment.
Oh, for sure. Everything is orchestrated. It's there's no time in spirit world, but here, of course, we're counting birthdays and stuff. That means nothing
Yeah.
to them. That means nothing. They can care less of us 47. I just saying that because just to say in reference to her fulfilling. There was no missteps with her. Is what I'm trying to say. She was born. She was revered. She was groomed. She was a shaman. She was a medicine woman. She was all of these beautiful things. She healed her whole community and then some. And at the tender age of 20, she did everything. Check, 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 check. God said, okay, come home. So her life ended at 20. She gave birth, though, before she left Earth to my great grandmother, her daughter, Lizzie. So Lizzie was 6 months old when her mother passed and left her. And the story goes that Lucinda died because of complications of birth. Now that is what we refer to as our earthly cover story. That's not what really happened in the spirit world. The spirit world knows that Lucinda fulfilled the reason why she was there, her holy assignment, and she did it well from birth all the way through without a misstep. So her earthly assignment ended when she was 20. But here on earth, we always have to have a reason why somebody's leaving.
Yeah.
And so what they said was, oh, well, she just gave birth 6 months ago. Let's just say she had complications, even though there wasn't any complications.
Yeah. If you just joined us, we're talking with Deneen Joyner, and she is the author of a wonderful book. I think you're going to want to find out more about her and about the book, Soul Wounds and Sacred Revelations. And her website is actually deneenjoyner.com, DENEEN, and JOYNER.com. And please go to her website. We're going to be linked to her website so that you can find out more, continue your evolutionary process, and learn more about what it's all about, so to speak, when it comes to some of these soul wounds that we all have experienced at one time or another, to one degree or another, that seem to be, as the phrase seems to go sometimes on this program, that seem to be holding us back, that seem to be keeping us from finding and fulfilling our life's purpose. Now, you are a healer. You have many other gifts as well.
Yes.
And one of the aspects I'd like to discuss is, from your perspective, your experience, your insight and intuition, what to you is healing?
Okay. It's definitely a compilation of things. It really begins with the curiosity of the person to want to do something different. And I think that most people have just really decided somewhere along the way that they're not deserving of a happy life, even though it's really at the core of who we are. We're wired for happiness. We're not wired for pain or to carry it, which is why it becomes so sensitive. You become sensitive to carrying emotional pain because you're not meant to carry it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Most people think that they're sensitive and they grow tired in carrying it because they're just tired of carrying it. No, it's not just you're tired of carrying it. It's not supposed to be there. So healing actually means being able to remove all of the things that you believe healing is for you. Most people look at healing as negative, believe it or not. They think that if I have to face something that happened to me 10 years ago that I never unpacked, that's going to be real ugly. It's going to be traumatic. It's going to be life altering, and I'm never going to recover from it. And that's further from the truth. What I tell people about emotional pain is whatever it is that you have experienced, and it doesn't matter what it is. It could be, it could be something on, a lower scale of maybe somebody just really just hurt your feelings. Somebody hurt your feelings and it triggers something else that goes deeper, and it feels deeper because of the fact that you've never unpacked it. And so most people don't really want to look at that. They don't want to look at the fact that if somebody said to them, you're telling me you're about to start a new business. You go to your spouse and you say, I'm going to start a new business. I'm going to really just open that floral shop that I always wanted. I've done my research. I know who my competitors are, and it's on my heart. I'm just going to do it. And then your spouse says to you in response, I don't think that's a good idea. And you say, why not? Because you never finish anything. Now, to that person who just heard their husband say, you never finish anything, that's defeating, right? And because of the fact that you want to do it. But it's going deeper to this person who wants to open a floral shop, and the fact that their spouse is not supportive. It's going deeper, and it's making them feel unsupported, unworthy. These are the things that are coming up for this person while their husband is saying, you never finish anything. Nobody ever believes in me. Why is that? People never want to go deeper when these things come up in their life. They want to just stop at, my husband's not supportive. Well, why isn't your husband supportive? Take it further. And why do you feel like he's not supportive? What does that feel like when you're not supported? Are you able to go back and unpack that? Are you able to actually say, I'm going to follow this thread from here in real time where I'm not feeling supported by my husband, and follow that thread back to when I was 8 years old and I wanted to actually have a lemonade stand. And I kept saying, I want to go to the store. I want to do lemonade stand. I want to do a lemonade stand. And everybody kept blowing me off. No, you can't do it right now. Okay, fine. And then they come to me and they finally say, okay, you can do the lemonade stand. And you're like over the lemonade stand. You're like, I don't want to do it anymore. Right?
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden people are looking at you like, okay, she doesn't follow through. Well, you told us you wanted to do the lemonade stand. And you're thinking in your mind, well, that was like 4 months ago. So now you want to catch up, and now you want me to be excited about something I was excited about 4 months ago. Now I want to go and learn ice skating. I want to be an ice skater. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to have to get back to you because, me and your dad were struggling to try to do all these bills, and we can't get you lessons. We can't buy you skates. So you get what I'm saying? You have to be able to, with this healing thing, it's more to just say, I want to heal. I mean, who doesn't want to? But you have to want to really be invested in your healing, because it encompasses so many things. It's more than just saying it, and it's more than just going to therapy and meeting with a counselor or a therapist, and discussing, whatever it is that's been unresolved. And I have to say also, Richard, that as far as therapy and counseling, where I'm concerned, and this is my own personal, okay, I have to say this, it's nothing to do with you or me. This is my own personal belief about therapy, counseling, any modality like that versus what I do, which is soul healing. I believe if you do not address a trauma or a pain within a year, then what happens is that emotional pain, which is an energy, moves into your soul reservoir, and it lives there. It's actively living and breathing until you do something with it. When you allow an energy like soul emotion to reside in you, it's still in there, it's growing, it's festering, if you will, because you're not resolving it. If you're going to therapy for something that happened 15 years ago, my belief is basically all you're doing is giving it lip service. And it's staying up in your head more than your soul in your heart, which is where it is now. because you have allowed it to live within you for decades. Even though you're going forward to do something about it, really what you're doing is scratching the surface. You're really just, like I said, you're talking about it. You're giving it a reference. You're thinking about it. You're giving it some structure, but you're not going deep enough with it. So really, it's not going to do any service to you. The people who I work with have endured decades of therapy. So when they come to me, they're exhausted with it. They want something different and they want it now. Within the first session, they tell me they can't believe it. They're like, why didn't I come to you like 10 years? I could have got this over with decades ago.
Yeah. Well, and that's interesting. And I'm curious as to whether or not you're aware, with everybody shifting lifestyles for the last 3-4 months here in the United States in particular, if some of these things are coming up for people that would never have come up had we not gone through this outward process, total lifestyle change, to try to help to quell this particular virus, in this case, this pandemic that's going on.
Oh, for
Is that
sure.
something that you're aware of? That
Oh, for sure.
all of a sudden
Yes.
this stuff is starting to bubble up to the surface?
Yeah, for sure. I liken it to what happens to a person individually when they're going through an awakening. You know, there's stages to an awakening, and a person, I'll use that as a reference, and then we'll jump back to the universe and what's going on now. You know, but for an individual awakening for a person, what happens is two things. They can either choose to awaken on their own, which is, I always tell people, go for that one, pick A. You don't want divine to actually awaken you, which is B. So go for A, choose A, awaken on your own and say, hey, guess what? I'm ready to heal my life. I'm gonna do some things differently, and I'm ready to actually start to do that. What happens is when you choose A, then that means you're empowered, and you can actually partner with the pain and say, I acknowledge you, I know you're there, I neglected you for how long, but I'm ready to do the work, and we're gonna actually do this together. When you do that, then you're actually framing it, because you're in awakening. And the awakening is actually when you wake up and you're taking inventory. So that's all it is. You're inventorying your life. You're saying, that sucked. That really sucked. But that worked. I like that one. So I'm going to look into all of these, right? And so you want to figure out how you got where you are. How did I arrive at, feeling stuck, unfulfilled, and everything is like the same? How did I arrive at this? And how can I change this up? So the awakening is really just looking at everything, things coming up to the surface, just like you mentioned, for examination. So you're looking at it now. You're looking at it closer. And then we move into the journeying phase. The journeying phase is where you take all of that information from awakening, and you're now going to actually look into it. You're actually going to do something to get the answers, if you will. And there's lots of answers. So the journey, and then the latter part of it is the mastering phase. That's what we're trying to get to, which is really, really going to clear everything from your soul, and you're actually going to be healed. You're going to understand your life lessons. You're going to be closer to why you're here. So that is just in a nutshell, that's what a person would go through. And so your question is wonderful, because it is reminiscent of the same that's going on in the collective. So right now, like you said, it's 2020. And so we're seeing things for the first time, which is an awakening. So this is a collective awakening that is going on with the remnants of having the coronavirus and this racism that is going on that's coming up. And then we have a president as well that is pretty out there. So it's like all of these things are just, like you said, bubbling up. And, and I did actually, I guess some months ago on my own, I did a Facebook Live, and I talked about the two of them together. So the coronavirus, along with 2020, is huge, because 2020, as we know, means perfect vision. Corona actually is light. Corona means light. And so if you put the two of them together, then you say, okay, my eyes are open now. What am I seeing now that I have light? Because before I was in the dark about things, but now I have corona vision. And now I'm seeing, what am I seeing differently about my life? And now that I have to be quarantined or social distancing and I have more time than I care to spend with myself, why am I uncomfortable with being alone? Can we answer that question?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and see, that's the big thing that I've been promoting here on this program about 2020, the year of perfect vision, going within. We've got the time now. Spend time, little solo time. Spend 5 minutes if you can do that. 5 minutes meditating, or just being in nature. My wife and I happen to be very fortunate that we live up above Santa Barbara in a rural area where we have all kinds of animals that pass through, and we have dogs and a dog and cats and chickens, but we have other animals that come through. We've had a bear up there. We had a flock of turkeys, and so on and so on and so on. And sometimes I'll just stop. I'll stand outside the house when we get home, or when I've arrived home, and I'll just feel the breeze. I'll
Mhm.
listen to the birds, the crows. We've got crows up there as well. My wife has noticed that we've got little titmice, little birds, tiny little birds, hummingbirds, and on and on and on. Bees. I, as
Mhm.
a kid, used to be afraid of bees because I
Mhm.
couldn't really see them and didn't know what they were going to do.
Right.
And now, when they start buzzing around my head, I say, "Hello, thank you for being here." And that's even aside from the whole aspect of the problem we've been having for the last couple of decades with the bees.
Mhm.
I would say that even if we weren't having a problem, hey, it's great because you do such a great job for us in fertilizing
Yes.
and pollinating and so forth for
Yeah.
fruits and vegetables. So thank you for being here. You
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
and I don't even worry. It's not like, and please don't sting me. No, I don't
Right. No, you're not
worry
even
about
worried
that.
about it.
It's
Right.
not
Yeah.
that important.
Right.
So, and that's the other thing. Let's talk about this from your awareness, your learning, et cetera, about this phrase. And I throw this out to a lot of people. I have come to the conclusion, probably more so now in the last 14 years living where we do than ever before, nature is our greatest teacher.
Yes. Yes. It is. It is.
Tell us about your awareness and your understanding of that, and how you get that across to people who are living in very urban areas.
Mhm. Yeah. That's a beautiful question, actually. It really is. When you said it, I got chills, to be perfectly honest, because again, it reminds me of when we were born, when whoever you refer to, God, um, whatever that looks like for you, I want your listeners to know that we all were created, in his image, and we all have things that live within us that we've grown away from. There's just beautiful things that were instilled in you prior to even coming here to Earth. And once we come here, we forget that we are those spiritual beings. And so you're navigating your life as an earthly human, but you're really not an earthly human. And you're here on assignment. And you forget that because there's so many distractions, and you're surrounded by people who look like you, who are humans, and they're acting more human than spiritual. And so we all forget. The nature part, though, is what I'm speaking of as far as being connected to divine. So when you ask me about nature, I think about the rawest, purest, beautiful essence of God being instilled in each of us, and being able to tap into that at any moment of your life. It doesn't matter where you are. You could be, in an urban setting. You could be in, a city, or on a field of corn. You could be, up in space. You can tap into divine whenever you like. That's our birthright. And if you can do that, if you invite, because they are so honorable, the spirits are so honorable, they only witness. But if you invite and you say, I need you now, or I want to learn more about you, or I want to feel the essence, I want to feel that essence of what God placed on the inside of me. If you say that, you're going to feel it. Because I know one thing for sure, that when you invite in divine in your life, in your heart, it's activated instantly.
Mm.
It's not a wait. It's not a next week. It's not a this. It's not a good time. It happens instantaneously that you feel different. So if people can do that, if they can invite in divine, and you do have a set of, I call them spiritual posse. You have a spiritual posse. Everybody has a spiritual posse. They're just waiting. They're like, I don't hear anything. This person doesn't even talk to us.
Well,
You know?
and I even joke with people about listening to the still small voice or spiritual posse,
Yes.
and I say, look, if you're not going to follow the promptings, why do you bother listening? Now I say it facetiously because
Yeah.
I want them to listen.
Right.
I have learned, and I'm sure you have too, that that spiritual posse, to use your term, uh, it will never put you in harm's way. It might
Mm-mm.
challenge you
Mm-hmm.
in some fashion, but never
Mm-hmm.
put you in harm's way.
That's right. You're so right. I'm glad you said that because, and that's a whole different show. I'll have to come back and talk to you about the
Yeah.
spiritual. I'd love to come back and tell you who the spiritual posse are and what they consist of and what their role is. But you're exactly right. So they're angels that actually are assigned in periods of danger, harm, anything like that. So if there was any type of danger, they sense it, they protect you. If there was an event that was life altering, like a car crash or a near death experience, they're there with you every step of the way. You're
Mm.
always protected. You're always guided. You're always covered. They order your steps. So even if, and you've heard people say, they were in a car crash and they were upside down and they couldn't get out. And then all of a sudden they're sensing angels. It's real. And then
Hmm.
all of a sudden some stranger comes with Hulk strength and flips the car over and pulls them out. That's real. So you never have to worry, just like you said, Richard. You don't have to worry about any harm coming to you because they're there. And that's one thing about these angels. When you're in peril, or if you're in pain, or if you need them, you don't have to invite them. They're coming.
Yeah. Yeah. Deneen Joyner is my guest. Soul Wounds and Sacred Revelations is the title of her book. And Deneen Joyner is the website, deneenjoyner.com. We encourage you to go there to find out more about her and the work she does. She is available, and obviously we can connect these days more so now through these different platforms, whether it be Skype or Zoom or whatever other names there are out there. We're able to make that connection. It is not the same, of course, as face-to-face
Right.
contact in that respect, but
Mhm.
hey, we adapt. As
Yes.
humans, we adapt, we
We
adjust.
had to. We really have. We've been
Yeah.
pushed. We've been pushed to task. I have to say that this
Hmm.
really has made even me like try to be more creative with my followers.
Yeah.
It's really put you to task.
I want to take you back to our conversation earlier about the coronavirus and about obviously the whole issue going on, and I guess I could refer to the protesting as we have the coronavirus and we have Black Lives Matter because that's the focal point. Um, let's set aside Black Lives Matter for just a moment and talk specifically about the coronavirus, which started back in supposedly back in November of
Hmm.
2019.
Hmm.
From a metaphysical standpoint, spiritual metaphysical, okay, then the symbolism's all there.
Yes.
In Spanish or Spanish, corona means crown, which is
Yes.
interesting. So there's some
Yes.
royalty aspects to it as
Hmm.
well as
Hmm.
light.
Yes.
We as human beings collectively create scenarios
Hmm. Hmm.
that we choose to go through.
Yes.
From your perspective, and again, from that
Hmm.
level, that higher level,
Yes.
why do you think man has chosen to put himself through this scenario?
Well, I actually have to say that this was already, orchestrated, in spirit world. It had
Mhm.
to happen. And it
Ah,
had to happen because of the missed signs, just like the individual awakening I alluded to, you know. when somebody actually arrives at a awakening where divine has to intervene, and I didn't speak to that, so we'll talk about that now. Remember when I said choose A? Don't you don't want to choose B, because if you choose B, then that means divine is going to intervene and awaken you. And when that happens, that's when the car flips over. That's when the cancerous diagnosis is you're at stage 3 or 4. That's when those heightened events happen. And they happen that way because you've been living distracted and numb. Your eyes have been closed. You've been looking at the wrong thing. So what happens is signs have been delivered to you, but you failed to see them because you're numb. So when we're numb, then what happens is divine has to intervene. And that means I'm going to have to ratchet it up and really get her attention, because she's not hearing me. I've been telling her all these things. I've been showing her life. I've been saying, don't do that anymore, but do this. And she does the opposite every time. And she continues to do the same thing year after year, year after year. And we're up in spirit world. We're waiting for her to get to her holy assignment. She's already lifetimes, behind. She's been on earth, and she still hasn't done it. And this is like probably her 5th life. She's still playing around. So, we don't have time to play with her. So we're going to just kick it into high gear. So that's what happens when divine intervenes. That's B. You don't want B. So that's where we're at right now with this coronavirus. So when I say that it had to happen because we missed all the signs collectively. We've missed the signs. This is like a pass-fail test that everybody has to pass, or everybody has to fail. We have failed up until now. And so because of that, divine is now on the scene. So the people, unfortunately, who have lost their lives, to this virus, they actually signed on for that. And I know that your listeners might say, what is she talking about? They signed on to die? Yes, they did. That was a part of their soul contract before they came. They knew about this. So they were handpicked, and they said, I'll volunteer. I volunteer. Because in spirit world, if you sacrifice your life, when you get back home, the spirit world, people revere you. Okay? It's not the same there. So they already know that these people signed up to, go to Earth, participate in this coronavirus, and they know that they're actually gonna leave. That's the cover story. Remember I talked about the cover story?
Right.
The earthly cover story is that, I died of corona. When you get up to the spirit world, it's, hey, you volunteered for that, huh? Get it?
Yeah. Well, and it's very interesting too. It was said, this was back maybe a year and a half ago by one of my guests. And again, I am sharing this from as much of an apolitical position as I can. That the man in the White House today is going to be responsible for completely transforming our political system and possibly even our governing system, not by his actions per se in terms of consciously doing it, but by his inaction or unconscious actions.
For sure.
And we are kind of seeing that. And it's kind of sad too. But again, he's another one who signed on to play the role.
That's right.
To
for
do
sure.
this thing. And that's one of the things that is really hard for people to get.
It is.
Every human being that has ever lived and ever will live has a contract to play the role. They have been given I don't want to say a script.
No, they haven't, but you're right. And I tell
people, they've been given a role.
That's right. And I tell my clients, I say, play your part. They know what I mean.
Yeah.
Play your part.
And some people just cannot accept, because of their ego-centered, emotional perspective towards this person, that person, the other. I worked through 3 phases in my life in the last 4 years or more, where I now ask the question from a very heart-centered, non-political, non-judgmental position. of wanting to understand. And the question is, why? What is it that you are so afraid of? Because that's usually the root.
Mhm.
What is it you're so afraid of that causes you to have to speak and behave in this fashion that you alienate so many other people? What's
Mhm.
going on inside of you? I'm not asking you to change. That is
Right.
not my intent. My intent is for my understanding.
Right.
That's
That's right.
all. That's
That's right.
all.
That's right.
And we know that that's where that comes from. It's from a position of fear.
It
Bullies
is
that
for
I grew
sure.
up with, it was
Mhm.
from a position of fear.
For
They were
sure.
more afraid than I was,
Yeah.
because
Right.
I knew that at the end of 8th grade, or if I ran far enough and kept my distance, I was fine. I was
Right.
safe. There's no fear.
That's
But
right.
every time I got in proximity to these guys and some girls, um, it was not fun at all. I must thank you for joining us. And yes, we will have you back on the program. Deneen Joyner, who is my guest, deneenjoyner.com is the website. 3 final questions for you before we wrap up. And I can't thank
Okay.
you enough for being a part of Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World here in
My
20
pleasure. My
Perfect Vision.
pleasure.
First question is, who is Deneen Joyner?
Deneen Joyner is a spirit guide given a holy assignment to return to earthly realm to help people navigate emotional pain with a different lens using indigenous healing to explore their life, to help them clear their souls so they can move forward and fulfill their holy assignment, which has been waiting for them for several lifetimes.
What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you're doing now?
I want to be instrumental in preparing people for their holy assignment. I want to be the healer that I am, to be able to facilitate that on every level possible.
And finally, what is your life's purpose?
My life's purpose is to continue to do what I'm doing, which is to remember why I'm here so that I can, manifest the people who are meant to find me so that I can, again, be a beacon of light and hope for people who are afraid to look at their pain, to give it a different lens so that they can be more open to exploring it.
Well, Deneen Joyner, thank you again for joining us here on Tell Me Your Story. And we will touch base via email to schedule a second
Okay.
interview to
Okay.
continue this conversation.
Yes, I'd love to. It's my honor. Thank you for having me.
And I thank you for listening to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast podcast, love to love.